Good old Florida, the Sunshine State in the land of endless summer. For many people, it's the warm climate, miles of beaches, vibrant cities, and famous amusement parks that bring them down to Florida. While I myself do appreciate these features that Florida has to offer, it is the state's natural and wild beauty that makes it one of my favorite places to explore. Things like the miles of wilderness in the Everglades, the stunning reefs just offshore that make you feel like you're in another world, the clear springs in the northern part of the state, other freshwater wetlands, agricultural areas, xeric upland sandhills, and pine flatwoods all stand out in my mind when I think of Florida. As a result, a huge biodiversity of wildlife can be found across all these different habitats. This also includes some wildlife that is only found in Florida, like the Florida scrub jay, or occurs nowhere else in the United States. Well, here's the thing. Regardless of why you like or don't like Florida, there are a lot of people moving to this state. In 2023 alone, Florida gained over 365,000 new residents, pushing its current population close to 23 million people. And over the next 20 years, Florida's population is expected to increase by another 4 million, which really doesn't help that sea levels are rising, and by 2100 the Everglades is expected to be underwater. So as more development occurs throughout the state, there is going to be more encounters with people and wildlife. Amongst all the wildlife that calls Florida home, there are many snakes that can be found across the state, which I'm sure is only going to entice more people to move down here.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
If we are being realistic, most people don't like snakes, and the thought of even running into one is too terrifying to imagine. Unfortunately for those people, there are 44 snakes native to Florida, plus a few invasive species that have colonized the southern part of the state. But for people like myself though, snakes are a huge reason why we like Florida, and I personally have spent hundreds of hours of my free time, maybe a little too much time, searching for them down here. So I kind of feel qualified to try and answer the one question people who are afraid of snakes in Florida might ask. What are the good snakes and what are the bad snakes? To answer this question, you have to interpret it as this. If this snake bites me, will I die or will I live? Is it poisonous or is it not? So, are there poisonous snakes in Florida and are they bad? There is a lot to unpack here, but yes, there are venomous snakes in Florida, and in my opinion, I don't think they're really bad at all. Let me tell you what they are. Before we talk about the quote, bad snakes, let's clarify a few points. Poison versus venom. Is there really a huge difference between these two? And is it really worth making a big deal over it? To most people, probably not. But if we want to be technical, especially when we talk about snakes and wildlife, there is indeed a difference. When we think of poison and venom, they are essentially different proteins and other materials composed together to make different toxins that are used for different purposes. Animals that are poisonous use their toxin primarily as defense to protect themselves from predators. Poisonous animals often display bright colors as a warning to anyone who wants to eat them, such as red Fs in the northeastern United States. So if you are bitten by a poisonous animal, you are not going to be injected with the toxin. But if you get the crazy idea to decide to take a bite out of that animal, it would be best if you did not. For example, cane toads, which are invasive to Florida, have an insanely powerful bufotoxin that they secrete from their parotid glands behind the head when they feel threatened. If you handle a cane toad and come in contact with the toxin, it could irritate your skin, and if it somehow gets up there, it could even burn your eyes. But if you are crazy enough to bite onto the cane toad's head where the parotid glands are, ingesting their bufotoxin will cause cardiac arrest and you could likely die fairly quickly. On the other hand, animals that are venomous are normally safe to eat because the venom is usually not toxic when swallowed. This is because your stomach's hydrochloric acid can render the toxins in the venom harmless. Unless you decide to drink venom directly, which sounds really insane, in order for the venom to be harmful, it must be injected under the skin where it will damage tissues that are normally protected otherwise. So snakes, spiders, wasps, and other venomous animals use venom primarily as a tool for subduing their prey and hunting rather than to protect themselves from predators. In short, poison is ingested or inhaled and venom is injected. Now knowing this, when someone says to you, if that snake bites you, it's going to ruin your weekend, they're telling you that the snake is venomous. While there are poisonous snakes in other parts of the world, no snake in Florida is poisonous, but there are some venomous ones that you should know about. What snakes are venomous and what snakes are not? Before I talk about each of Florida's venomous snakes in detail, I think it's important to know what is the difference between the states of venomous and non-venomous snakes. Generally, when we refer to the venomous snakes, we are talking about the ones where a bite from would require medical attention because it could be fatal. The majority of the snakes in Florida are harmless because getting bit by them won't require this medical care. These snakes are clumped together in a group known as the colubrids, which are basically a bunch of snakes that aren't necessarily closely related, but not distinct enough to be separated. As I said, colubrids are mostly harmless, but some do have a mild venom that is not, and I stress, not lethal to humans. This is because their venom is too weak and produced in amounts too small to cause serious harm to humans. In addition, some of these snakes hardly or never bite when handled, so there are very few cases of people developing reactions to their venom. The common garter snake, which is arguably the most abundant snake everywhere they are found, literally there are millions of individuals, does have a mild neurotoxic venom in their saliva. There have been some cases of people developing a slight allergic reaction or bruising from bites, but garter snake venom cannot seriously injure, let alone be fatal to someone. Southern ringneck snakes are another common colubrid in Florida that has a weak, mild venom used for hunting prey. I do remember reading somewhere about someone who had a reaction to a ringneck snake bite. However, it is very rare for these snakes to even bite, and more importantly, the venom is too weak to be fatal to humans. In my life, I had one ringneck snake try to bite me, and it was more surprising than anything else. The eastern hognose snake, which is my all-time favorite snake in the world, and is just awesome in every way, is perhaps the one colubrid that people know is actually venomous. Bites from hognose snakes are almost unheard of outside of captive situations, and I've seen like one video on YouTube of a hognose actually trying to bite someone. Like other colubrids, the symptoms from the very few hognose bites ever documented were not severe, and the venom is not fatal to humans. At the end of the day, some colubrids do possess a weak, mild venom that is stored in a way analogous to medically or true venomous snakes. However, they are still harmless, and most field guides don't even bother saying that they are venomous to protect these snakes from unnecessary persecution. In Florida, there are species of medically venomous snakes that possess powerful hemotoxins or neurotoxins stored in venom glands in the head. Fixed or hinged fangs transport the venom from this gland when the snake bites onto something. Unlike colubrids, the venom in these species can cause severe damage to human tissues and other systems, along with producing severe symptoms that, if left untreated, can be fatal. People who have pre-existing health conditions are at even greater risk, as the venom is capable of worsening these conditions. But ultimately, despite the potential harm these snakes can cause, human deaths from them are actually very rare. In fact, according to the CDC, 7,000 to 8,000 people in the entire United States are bitten by venomous snakes each year. While there is still a possibility of suffering long-term injury, only 5 people per year are killed by venomous snakes. This means that more than 99% of people who are bitten by venomous snakes each year in the United States will survive. Compared to the global averages, 2.7 million people are envenomated by venomous snakes according to the World Health Organization, and unfortunately up to 138,000 people die every year. The much lower death toll in the United States is mostly due to proper medical treatment readily available that significantly reduces the risk of mortality, which is seriously lacking in the middle and developing countries. In fact, despite Australia containing some of the world's most venomous snakes, an average of 2 people were killed per year from 2000 to 2016, according to one study. In the United States, factors such as dry bites, which means the snake did not use any venom when the bite occurred, venomous snakes not being as toxic, which allows people more time to travel to seek medical care after getting bitten, and the snakes themselves, who generally try to avoid conflicts with people, also all factor into the few human deaths from the venomous snakes here. Alright, so most of Florida's snakes are harmless, and a bite by them isn't going to send you to the hospital. However, there are some that can, so what are the bad snakes to watch out for? In Florida, there are 6 species of venomous snakes that range from being found practically statewide to only occurring in specific areas. These snakes can be broken into a couple of different groups. First, we have the Crotolinae, a subfamily of the Viperidae snakes commonly known as pit vipers. Pit vipers, which are found in Asia and in the Americas, have hinged fangs, meaning they can retract them when not in use, just like other vipers. However, they have a unique organ that can be seen as loreal pits, which are deep white depressions found on either side of the snake's head, in between the eyes and the nostril. This organ gives pit vipers a thermal readout of their surrounding environment, allowing them to detect differences in temperature. In other words, pit vipers have heat vision, and it comes in handy when they hunt warm-blooded prey. 5 of Florida's 6 venomous snakes are pit vipers, which includes the rattlesnakes and the echistrodons, which are also known as American moccasins, and both groups are only found in North America. Rattlesnakes are easy to identify because they have keratin rattles that grow on the ends of their tails, which no other snake has. Some people might say that you can count the buttons on a rattlesnake's rattle to tell how old it is, but that isn't true. Keratin is material found in your hair and fingernails, and just like us, a rattlesnake's rattle can grow, break off, and grow back. Every time they shed, a new segment or button is added to the rattle, and shedding can occur multiple times a year. There are 3 rattlesnakes that call Florida home. American moccasins consist of cottonmouths and copperheads, and 1 species of each is found in Florida. The other group of venomous snakes found in Florida is known as the Elapidae. These snakes have fixed immovable fangs at the front of their mouths, and there is a huge diversity of elapids in the Old World, places like Africa, Asia, and Australia. These include cobras, black mambas, taipans, sea snakes, kraits, and others. Basically, the most venomous snakes in the world are in this family of snakes. However, in the Western Hemisphere, the only elapids that are found are coral snakes, and 1 species occurs in Florida. So now, let us get more in depth and learn about each species of venomous snake. The Florida cottonmouth, also known as the water moccasin, is an echistrodon that is arguably Florida's most ubiquitous venomous snake. They are found around a variety of freshwater wetlands statewide, including the Florida Keys, but I would say that they are not as common down there as compared to other parts of the state. They get their name cottonmouth because of the white color that makes up the interior of their mouths, which the snake displays as a form of intimidation when threatened. There have been records of cottonmouths reaching 6 feet long, but the largest I've seen were around 5 feet in length. On average though, most of the individuals you're going to see are going to be around somewhere between 2 to 4 feet long. These snakes are thick-bodied with light brown and dark brown crossbands streaked with dark markings. Cottonmouths give birth to live young, and neonate cottonmouths, or babies, are very light in color and possess a yellow-tipped tail, which they use for caudal luring. This is used to help the snakes hunt, so they'll wiggle their tails to attract lizards, amphibians, and other small prey who think the yellow tip is something they want to eat, but they end up as a cottonmouth snack instead. Individuals usually become darker and less patterned as they age, so the diversity of pattern in this snake is more variable than you would think. Piscivorus, which means fish eater, was the old species name for cottonmouths before the recent taxonomic changes basically reclassified all of them. However, cottonmouths will eat other animals, including small rodents, other snakes, and even young turtles. As I mentioned earlier, this snake is very ubiquitous, and in some places in Florida, like the Everglades, they are probably the snake you will find the most often. I have seen at least a dozen cottonmouths in one night in Florida on multiple occasions, and know others who have seen even more than that. There are misconceptions surrounding cottonmouths that have been integrated into our society. First off, many people think that the non-venomous Nerodia, also known as water snakes, are cottonmouths, and many are unfortunately killed because of this. It is easy to make this misidentification in Florida, since water snakes and water moccasins are found together often, and do look the same at a quick glance. But Nerodia have oval pupils and no loreal pits, whereas cottonmouths have elliptical pupils and loreal pits. Also, cottonmouths tend to periscope more often when they are moving, and their heads are more triangular and larger relative to the body. In Florida, there are a few species of Nerodia, such as the massive Florida green water snake, the Florida banded water snake, the mangrove salt marsh snake, and the brown water snake. The other misconception about cottonmouths is their aggressive behavior. People have claimed that they have been aggressively chased down by the cottonmouths who were out for blood. They say that the snake chased them for quite a distance, and the encounter was absolutely terrifying. I think that there are a couple of things going on here. There indeed have been cases of curious cottonmouths following people on boats or chasing after fish on the end of someone's line. In these cases, the cottonmouth was probably thinking, "Hey look, there's something I can bask on," or "Hey, there goes some food I want to eat." The cottonmouth has no intention of harming the people involved, but the sight of a venomous snake coming right at them with no fear causes the people to panic, and in some cases attempt to kill the snake, which in turn causes the cottonmouth to become defensive and to do anything necessary to protect itself. If you see a cottonmouth and are afraid, remember to keep your distance and remain calm, and the snake will leave you alone. If you decide to approach a cottonmouth, it will likely mouth gape and try to scare you, curl up, rattle its tail, and strike at you, and if that fails, it will flee away. But it can do all those things in any order, making them appear unpredictable. As someone who has encountered and approached hundreds of cottonmouths myself, and accidentally stepped on or even on cottonmouths, which thankfully I did not receive a bite for, I have never had one chase after me with bloodthirsty intent for a significant distance or time. So to those of you who will argue and say, "No, George, water moccasins are river monsters who always chase people with dangerous intent," until I see video footage of one doing that or experience it myself, I call
That is bogus!
It is important to know that snakes, including water moccasins, are not aggressive. They are just trying to defend themselves for something they think is going to harm or kill them. I tried doing some research to find out how many people have died from a Florida cottonmouth bite in Florida, but to my surprise, I could not find any documentations. There have been a few reported cases of cottonmouth bites in Florida over the last several years. A young girl did receive a dry bite earlier this year, and a couple of people had to spend time in the ICU. Fortunately, though, everyone survived. An NIH article reported that in 2017, 255 people in the United States were bitten by cottonmouths, but fortunately no deaths were documented. I was able to find 4 causes or likely causes of people dying from a cottonmouth bite in the United States. Half did not or were unable to seek medical care, and the rest were from 1971 or earlier. At the end of the day, the Florida cottonmouth is a very common venomous snake in the Sunshine State, whose behaviors are mostly misunderstood. While bites from this snake are rare for a number of reasons, not seeking medical care in most situations could end up being fatal. The eastern copperhead is the second echistrodon that is found in the state of Florida. These snakes are some variation of orange coloration with brown cross bands across the body in the shape of usually hourglasses. Copperheads are smaller than cottonmouths, with record individuals measured at just over 4 feet long. The largest I've seen personally were pushing 4 feet in length, but most individuals are like 1.5 to 3 feet long. The copperhead relies on its pattern to blend into its surrounding environment and often chooses to remain motionless when encountered. I've been around copperheads for a couple of hours at a time, and they did not move at all. Usually they will move and be more defensive when crossing roads and in open areas. If provoked, they might rattle their tails and strike without warning. Some people say copperheads smell like cucumbers from a musk they produce when they are threatened, but I have never smelled that personally. Copperheads give birth to live young, and like cottonmouths, neonates also participate in caudal luring. Prey consists of smaller vertebrates such as mammals and amphibians, but younger individuals will prey on insects as well. In some parts of their range, they have been documented trying to climb trees to hunt cicadas, but they are not arboreal snakes in the slightest. Copperheads prefer more upland habitat such as rocky hillsides, especially in the northern US, but are just as common in agricultural areas, especially in the southern US. In Florida, copperheads are at the southern limit of their range and are probably the state's rarest venomous snake. They are only found in the western panhandle and west of Tallahassee along the Apalachicola River and its tributaries. Here, they prefer upland pine and hardwood forests with lots of leaf litter for camouflage and forests adjacent to low wetlands. Copperheads do account for many of the venomous snake bites reported throughout their range, and in some cases, people have been killed by them. I could not find any reported cases of someone being bitten by a copperhead in Florida just from a quick Google search, though it would not surprise me if there have been any reported cases historically. I do think the chance of someone being killed by a copperhead in Florida is extremely low given their limited range, but if you do live in their range in Florida, just be mindful of where you are placing your feet, especially when walking in the woods where the snakes might be hiding in the leaf litter. The copperhead is the only venomous snake I've yet to see in Florida, but I have found them in South Georgia and elsewhere. We are moving on to the rattlesnakes, and we'll work our way from smallest to largest. The Dusky Pygmy Rattlesnake might not be endemic to Florida, but the fact that it only occurs elsewhere in South Georgia and barely into Alabama and Mississippi makes Florida the stronghold for this tiny pit viper. A 3-foot Dusky Pygmy Rattlesnake might be a record for the largest individual ever seen. Very rarely does this snake exceed 2 feet in length, and the largest one I have ever seen personally blew my mind at 18 inches. Most individuals are going to be between a half a foot to a foot long. Despite its small size, the pygmy is a stunning rattlesnake with beautiful patterns. Individuals will range from dark to light gray in body color, with irregular positioned black dots streaked across the body. The head contains dark horizontal stripes, including in the eye. Some individuals have a profound reddish-orange dorsal stripe that runs the length of the body, but other individuals lack the stripe almost entirely, which gives them a more anrithristic appearance. The Dusky Pygmy occurs statewide in Florida with the exception of the Keys and can be found in a variety of different habitats, though they are more concentrated in some areas compared to others. Some of the most abundant populations occur in the pine flatwoods in the northern part of the state, where they can be found crossing roads. But really, any hammock and prairie that borders a wetland is a good spot to see them, especially along the side of hiking trails or on the bases of oak trees. They do also occur in habitats in and around xeric sandhills, but here they are not as common. People will find pygmies around homes in Florida, especially under objects like garbage bins. Dusky pygmies, like other rattlesnakes, give birth to live young, and like the American moccasins, they will conduct caudal luring. But even as they age, it's hard to find adults with rattles large enough to make the buzzing sound rattlesnakes are really known for. Pygmies have a varied diet consisting of invertebrates, amphibians, other snakes, lizards, and small mammals. When threatened, Dusky Pygmy rattlesnakes will either flee, head twitch, rattle, coil up, and in rare cases, strike. Like many other venomous snake bites, people are usually bitten by Dusky Pygmies by accidentally stepping on them, making hand contact accidentally, and intentionally harassing them. With that all being said, there has never been a documented human fatality from a Dusky Pygmy rattlesnake bite anywhere, but their hemotoxic venom is still potent enough to send a person to the hospital, especially smaller children, which could result in long-term injury. Despite that, Dusky Pygmy rattlesnakes are very docile and can easily be admired from a safe distance. The timber rattlesnake might be the most iconic pit viper in all of the United States and is my personal favorite rattlesnake. You might recognize the timber rattlesnake on some Revolutionary War related flags that some might consider a little controversial today. But Benjamin Franklin himself wrote an anonymous letter to the Philadelphia Journal stating why he believed the timber should be the symbol of America. The timber rattlesnake is often associated with upland montane habitats throughout the Appalachians, where they are very communal, denning and giving birth together in large numbers. They are tied to these landscapes and return to their dens and birthing rookeries every year like clockwork. In Florida, there are no mountains, so how can timber rattlesnakes survive down here? Well, let me introduce you to the canebrake. To me, the canebrake rattlesnake is more than just another common name for Crotalus horridus. Timber rattlesnakes in the coastal plain of the southeastern United States become lighter in coloration, have a more profound dorsal stripe, and are kind of a bunch of loners. Instead of partying up in communal dens, they are happy just doing their own thing, going about life in the lowland closed canopy forest, usually around wetlands, cane thickets, sometimes venturing into longleaf pine forests, and they especially like to hang around tin and other structures in disturbed agricultural areas, even things like doors. In Florida, timber rattlesnakes are at the southern limit of their range and are really only found in the northeast corner of the peninsula and a small slither into the panhandle. Some records do occur from the western panhandle and like the Daytona Beach area, but I bet you it's going to be really hard for you to find timber south of Gainesville in Alachua County. Timber rattlesnakes are some of the world's largest rattlesnakes, with records exceeding 6 feet in length. Most adults are going to be between 3 to 5 feet long, and the largest I have seen were pushing closer to 5. Timber rattlesnakes are extremely variable in pattern, ranging from almost completely black to a very light pinkish gray. This color is dependent on the types of habitats and where they are found in their range. But the ones in Florida will be that lighter pinkish gray tan color with black tails and dark bands across the body. Timber rattlesnakes are live-bearing, and in Florida, females will give birth in a hole or in a log somewhere in the woods during late summer and early fall, and after a small period of time together, she and her young will go their separate ways. In the mountains, though, the young will follow their mothers and other adults to overwintering den sites and will return there for every winter. In the mountains, you will get hundreds of timbers congregating together around their rocky homes. But in Florida and throughout much of the coastal plain, it's rare to see more than a handful of adults together. I have seen timbers in the mountains of the eastern US and canebrakes in South Georgia, but the only timber I saw in Florida was one that had been hit by a car in the pine flatwoods. Hopefully I'll get to see a live one soon. When threatened, timber rattlesnakes will rattle, coil up, and if upset enough, they will strike. I would say that timbers are some of the more docile rattlesnakes, but do not underestimate the venom they possess. I would strongly encourage anyone who is bitten by this snake to seek medical care as soon as possible. While deaths from timber rattlesnakes are still a rare occurrence, more people have been killed by this species than any I have mentioned so far. 10 years ago, a 4-year-old boy from North Florida was bitten by a timber rattlesnake while farming with his father, and he tragically passed away 2 weeks later. If you encounter a timber rattlesnake in northern Florida, keeping your distance is the best way to avoid being bitten. These snakes will not bite unless provoked, and if left alone, they are not going to bother anyone. I will say that you should proceed with extreme caution if the snake starts rattling, but keeping a safe distance is even more applicable. As with other venomous snakes, the use of a snake hook or some other long object that can hook the snake close to the head is helpful if you need to move the snake. There is something just truly iconic about timber rattlesnakes. Every time I see one, it just puts me in a state of awe, and I cannot help but just admire these beautiful animals that I feel so privileged to share this planet with. A snake that needs no introduction is the magnificent eastern diamondback rattlesnake, and to many who love snakes, seeing one is like finding the Holy Grail. With individuals documented over 8 feet long, eastern diamondbacks are the world's largest rattlesnake. Typically though, adults will range from 3 to 6 feet in length, and the largest I've seen was a 5.5 foot individual. The eastern diamondback is distinguishable with its beautiful diamond bands streaked across the dorsal side of the snake. The body coloration is usually some form of light brown, but some individuals are darker than others. The tail has a black banding pattern and the head is full of dark patterning, and the eyes are darker compared to other rattlesnakes. The western diamondback rattlesnake closely resembles the eastern, but the tail pattern bandings are more pronounced and the eyes are much lighter in color. Eastern diamondbacks are found statewide in Florida, though they are harder to find in the Keys. This species is a habitat generalist ranging from xeric sandhills, where they are often found overwintering in gopher tortoise burrows, to barrier islands and hammocks surrounding wetlands. And they are good swimmers, by the way. They're mostly active during the day, but they can be found crossing roads at night during warmer months, especially in the Everglades where I've seen them do that on several occasions. Eastern diamondbacks are live-bearing, and females have been known to birth communally, but not quite on the level as timbers do in the mountains. The eastern diamondback is a very defensive snake. When threatened, they sometimes just flee, but often they will stand their ground, raise their tails to rattle very loudly, and will also raise their head and neck far off the ground into an S-shaped striking pose. They will hold this position and stare you down, trying to be as intimidating as possible, while starting to slowly back away. If you see a diamondback in this striking position, back off and give it space. Diamondbacks can strike 2/3 the length of their body, meaning that if you encounter a huge 6-foot eastern diamondback and you're standing 4 feet away, it could bite you. And you do not want to get bitten by this snake. Because of their size, eastern diamondbacks possess a lot of venom, so immediately seek medical attention if bitten. While deaths by eastern diamondbacks are still rare, since the 1960s at least 4 people have been killed by this snake in Florida alone, and 2 have been in this century. The best advice I can give is to keep a safe distance from this snake and leave it alone. Diamondbacks are not aggressive at all towards people and tend to prefer undisturbed areas to avoid us entirely. They will only bite if they are being harassed or feel threatened. With that being said, if you respect an eastern diamondback and let it do its thing, they are one of the most amazing snakes to lay eyes on. I have been lucky to have done so almost 20 times to date, and every eastern diamondback I saw felt like seeing one for the first time. The eastern coral snake, or harlequin coral snake, is the only elapid found in the state of Florida. While it may occur statewide with the exception of every Florida key south of Key Largo, don't let that make you think they are easy to find. Coral snakes are very cryptic and luck is often required to see one. For example, I drove on one road in the Everglades multiple times a week for 9 months and only found one coral snake crossing that road during that time. But it is quite possible to walk around a suburban neighborhood in Florida and just happen to see one crossing a sidewalk. Eastern coral snakes are habitat generalists, but I don't think they really prefer one type of habitat over the next. Once I found one crossing a dirt road in some very xeric habitat, but they are just as comfortable in wet hammocks and forest bordering swamps. Typically, most corals are going to be between 1.5 feet to 3 feet long, but records of individuals have approached 4 feet in length. The ones I've seen were all around the typical length though. It is very important to know the pattern of a coral snake because 2 non-venomous snakes in Florida, the scarlet snake and the scarlet king snake, look just like them. Red touches black, venom lack. Red touches yellow, kills a fellow, or something like that, refers to the positioning of the red, yellow, and black bands on these 3 tricolored snakes. The red and black bands touch on both the scarlet and the scarlet king snake, while the red bands touch the yellow bands on the coral snake. Another obvious difference is the color of the head. Coral snakes will have dark snouts while the rest of the head is mostly black, but the scarlet snake and the scarlet king snake might have some black on their heads, but the snout is always red or orange. So, based on what you have just learned, is this photo of a coral snake or not a coral snake? Feel free to pause the video and resume it when you're ready. If you guessed not a coral snake, then you are correct. But how about this one? This is indeed a coral snake. How about this one? You're right, that is also a coral snake. But what about this one? Nope, that is a Florida scarlet snake. How about this one? That is a scarlet king snake. Now, which one is the coral snake in these images? Ah, gotcha, no coral snakes here. Image C is actually a Louisiana milk snake. How about this one? Yup, image B is a coral. Coral snakes also have round pupils and no loreal pits, which separates them from the other venomous snakes of Florida. Coral snakes are also the only venomous snakes in Florida that lay eggs, which are laid underground or in leaf litter. When coral snakes are encountered, they will make every attempt to flee. Bites from coral snakes are extremely rare because you really have to piss a coral snake off for it to bite you, and most of the time they have to chew to envenomate. But if they do decide to bite, coral snakes do have a powerful neurotoxin that warrants a trip to the hospital, especially because symptoms do not appear until up to some time later in some cases. I read an article saying that 4 people were envenomated in Central Florida during 2018 because they misidentified a coral snake and picked it up while posting the photos on Facebook. Fortunately, though, all these people lived. Inocencio Hernandez unfortunately was not so lucky. On June 10, 2006, Hernandez and another man named Jesus Moreda attempted to kill an eastern coral snake in Bonita Springs, Florida. Both men were bitten by the coral snake, but Hernandez collapsed minutes after and tragically died from the bite. Hernandez's death was the first confirmed from a fatal coral snake bite in the United States since 1967, nearly 40 years later. The moral of the story here is that if you don't pick up an eastern coral snake, your chance of survival is basically 100%. If you're lucky enough to see one in the first place. Take photos, enjoy the experience, because it might be the last one you see in a very long time. So there you have it, the 6 venomous or bad snakes that are found in the state of Florida. Well, okay, we got to address this. Should we call snakes bad because they are venomous and snakes good that are not? Well, if it helps you remember the difference between the two, sure, I guess. But when I think of the words good and bad, I think of right and wrong, light and dark, good versus evil. And to be honest, I know that our society has always portrayed snakes as spawns of Satan, monsters that want to terrorize us that need to be defeated. But I don't view any snake in this way. Snakes are just wild animals, trying to survive a challenging world, whether that is from natural threats or from the ever-growing threat of humans encroaching onto their land. To a snake, we are just another predator that could potentially harm them, and regardless of how big or small they are, or if they're venomous or not, any snake will always respond in a defensive manner to protect itself. In the case of venomous snakes, that might involve them having to use important resources that they would much rather spend on hunting things they want to eat versus wasting it on things they think are going to eat them. So no, I don't think that a snake being venomous makes it bad, but rather is an animal I should always be more cautious and alert around when compared to most non-venomous snakes. If there is a snake I would call, quote, bad in Florida, that would be the invasive Burmese pythons. Not because they are evil monsters by any stretch, but because as an invasive species just trying to survive, they've wiped out mammal populations across the Everglades by eating them, and have caused native snake populations to decline by giving them parasites that they are not evolved and adapted to handle. With that being said, we cannot ignore the fact that venomous snakes do have the potential to be dangerous, and as Florida's human population continues to expand and more land is being developed, more people are getting bitten every year. So for Floridians who are worried about receiving a venomous snake bite, here are some tips I would recommend. The best advice I can give is if you see a snake and you don't know if it's venomous or not, then leave it alone and give it space. Contrary to what you might have heard, snakes will not chase you, and if one does approach you, it is doing so out of curiosity and not trying to harm you. Note that if you approach a snake even with the intent to kill it, you are significantly increasing your chances of getting bit yourselves. It might sound self-explanatory, but always try to be mindful of your surroundings and, if applicable, the surroundings of your young children. I wouldn't recommend walking barefoot in Florida where you can't see where you're going, but also note that snakes sometimes like to show up in unexpected places, so I recommend always watching where you're placing your hands and your feet in the sunshine state. If you are walking in the woods in Florida in tall vegetation where you can't see the ground cover well, wearing boots, even those that go well above your ankle, is always a good idea. Me personally, I always wear rain boots when I'm purposely looking for venomous snakes, and dealing with surprised onlookers is much better than dealing with a snake bite. If you are bitten by a venomous snake in Florida, try to seek medical attention as quickly as possible. Not seeking any medical care significantly increases your chances of succumbing to the bite, but the time you have to reach the hospital is more than you might think.
But if someone was ever to be bit, the nearest hospital to Peter Sam is UMass Memorial in Worcester, about a 52-minute drive.
Ideally, if you can get treatment within 6 hours with antivenom, the outcome is almost like 99% survival.
If you follow these and other procedures to prevent a bite from a venomous snake or to deal with a bite, your chances of being unharmed will be much greater. It is also important to remember that while yes, people have tragically been killed by venomous snakes in Florida and elsewhere in the US, in this country it is still a very rare occurrence, and the number of people killed by bites is one of the lowest causes of death in the United States. But I will not end without mentioning that it is harder for our beloved dogs to avoid venomous snakes who love to see the world through their nose. I have seen plenty of hunting dogs roaming through areas in Florida where I have also seen venomous snakes, and I won't lie, I do think that dogs have a greater chance of being bitten than we do. So to avoid terrible tragedies like this, and to prevent people from having to do this, here is what I would recommend doing for people concerned about their canine companions getting too curious with a venomous snake. If I owned a dog while living in Florida, I would take them to an in-person venomous snake avoidance training so they can learn to associate venomous snakes as something they should not go near. The Snake Avoidance Clinic located in Palm Bay is a great way to learn different techniques to train dogs to avoid venomous snakes while also learning more about the venomous snakes themselves. All dogs are welcome, but it appears that hunting dogs could really benefit from this training. Trainings are on specific dates, so you will have to register in advance. Courteous Canine in the Tampa area is another location that offers private one-on-one training for dogs on a leash to avoid venomous snakes. I think this is another good option, but I would personally prefer training that accounts for dogs being off-leash, since that happens in backyards or in hunting situations. I will link the website to these trainings in the video description, along with this podcast about a fantastic venomous snake avoidance training program offered in Arizona, which has more than double the number of venomous snakes than Florida does. My goal of creating this video is to provide helpful information to people living in Florida about the venomous snakes that live alongside them. While I truly believe that these animals are very misunderstood, I am not trying to force people to stop fearing venomous snakes and snakes in general. Rather, I hope that this video allows people to be more informed, reduce the risk of fatal encounters, and maybe actually cause more people to appreciate and respect all of Florida's native snakes. So to the I ran a half marathon while being chased by a water moccasin crowd, put down the garden hoe, the 2x4, or the shotgun, stop swerving out of your way to kill snakes, and instead take out your cell phone and photograph the 15-foot diamondbacks you so boldly claim to have seen, and teach your kids that venomous snakes are not bad. They're just animals that deserve to be respected and to be mired from a safe distance. And get your dogs in venomous snake avoidance training as well. Thank you everyone for checking out this video. Feel free to like the video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to my channel if you want to check out more snake related content. I hope you have a great day.